Hello everyone, welcome to another video. My name is Philip, I'm also known as PS or PS Enough. Today we're going to do a video out of my Patreon tier. The tier is called Pick a Topic, Any Topic, where someone picks a topic for me to talk about and I try to cover it during the month. The topic for this month is about the demo scene again. The question is the demo scene in an upward or downward trend? Are there more or less sceners / releases than in the past? How can we quantify it? Is it relevant? Do we really care about it as demo sceners? So my opinions about it. It's hard to quantify for starters. There are some databases, of course. There is Puet that you see here. There's also DemoZoo. There is also CSTV. But they don't show the demo scene in the whole. They only show some parts of it. So it's hard to have a good idea. Also, for example, on Puet, it's very comprehensive, but it doesn't have all of the entries that were ever released. There are still a lot of missing points, especially from the earlier demo scene from the 90s or late 80s. There aren't all the demos that ever existed here, and there aren't all the parties that were ever created here. So it's a bit hard to measure these things. But for example, Gloom did an article about this. He got all the data from Puet. Gargai helped him get it off, and he did an article showing the state of the scene with the trends in terms like with a chart. So we can take a look at that and see some how the scene has been evolving. You can see here, for example, the number of events, and events are like demo parties. They seem to have peaked in the 90s, and then there was somewhat of a decline, and we are somewhere there. Be aware that this study was made in 2014. We are now in 2018, so there must have been some small changes. It hasn't been revised yet. Gloom, if you're watching this, please do an update on this article. It would be cool to see what has been happening on the last 4 years. I will tell you guys my personal opinion from dealing with the scene and following the scene. But it can always be wrong, data is always better than guesswork. So in terms of events, there was clearly a high peak on the late 90s in terms of events. And be aware that these events, they might not be comprehensive. There might have been a lot of more demo parties early on. I mean, on the recent years, pretty much for sure, all of the demo parties that existed are listed on Puet. But from the years before, that's not always the case. There might even have been events where either there weren't any releases or there were too little releases, so no one really uploaded them, distributed them properly. So there might be a hole there because of that. So be aware of that fact. So I think there were even more events before, and now there are less. There are typically like 2, maybe 3 parties on each country. In Europe, of course. Then in Japan, you have 1 demo party only. In Australia, you have 2, 3. On the US, you have 2, 3 as well. But most of the scene is focused around Europe, and in Europe, most countries have like 1 or 2 parties at least. Some parties that are more active have more the events, like for example Germany has like maybe 6, 7 per year. France also has like 4. Finland has 2, 3, 4 as well. So bear that in mind. But overall, the tendency is around 2, 3 parties per country in Europe, or Central Europe at least. But the numbers have gone down compared to the 90s. But in the 90s, there was the peak of the demo scene. It was like where it was exploding. There was a very big scene on the Amiga. It was starting to surge up on the DOS scene that then migrated to Windows, and there was a lot of boom. Like every teenager who was into computers was in the demo scene. And since then, we sort of declined in terms of numbers, but the quality is still around. Let's take a look at more charts. The number of active groups, and by active they consider the groups that have released something on that year, seems to also have lowered. There were a lot of groups back then. Most of them were like joke groups of other groups as well, so it's a bit doubtful if this number is actually relevant. But yeah, overall there are less groups. It's a fact. There are also less active sceners. That's also a fact. Total number of productions, considering all platforms, it's been going down ever since the 90s. You can see here. But it has sort of stabilized around almost 1,000 per year. And this doesn't include all the releases. It is like the executable releases, but it might not have all the demos that were released for Commodore 64, for example, or not all the demos that were released for Atari, just because Puet is more focused on the PC scene and not all of the scene. So I think overall, in terms of the demo scene, it should be around 1,000. I'm not quite sure how it evolved from 2014 onwards, if it's still around the same level, if it lowered, if it got higher. I would assume it's around the same level. I don't think there has been many differences since 2014. But I haven't seen that many people quitting. There are new people coming in, some people phase out. It's normal, but I think it's around the same level. We haven't been lowering. One debate I had the other day, though, was the number of comments on Puet, and that has significantly lowered. So that means that less people follow the scene actively or comment about it, which for me was a surprise. I was expecting it was pretty much the same, but we checked numbers, and indeed it's been on a downslope. Less people comment about demos, less people watch demos, thumb up demos or thumb down demos. I'm not sure if it was necessarily because DemoZoo also came out and now more people focus on DemoZoo instead of Puet. Puet became a bit toxic as well. It was pretty much known for being a toxic channel or forum for the demo scene. A lot of flame wars popped up on Puet. A lot of people decided to stop making productions because of the reactions that they got on Puet. So people not understanding their passion for the demo, or just talking shit because the demo is not perfect or not on par to what they would expect from other demo sceners. So yeah, you have to have that in mind. But it seems that we've been having less activity on Puet, but we have been having more activity on other channels. Like, for example, Facebook has a lot more activity about the demo scene recently. And places like Twitter, stuff like that, other social networks start having more talk about demo scene. Let's take a look at platforms themselves. They checked the numbers of productions per platform. It seems Windows is still the main platform being developed. C64 got a bit of a research on the last few years. The same thing about the Spectrum, even though it's not quantified here, and the Amiga. We have been seeing more Amiga productions lately. And we had some talks about that before, and it can be explained from people who used to be active back then in the 90s. They sort of became disinterested in the demo scene and now are interested again, not for exploring the newest platform possible to the maximum, but mostly to pick up what they already knew and try to do something better because they themselves evolved as a person. So we have seen a lot of old Amiga demo sceners who, after, I don't know, 5 years, 8 years of being inactive, they suddenly decide to come back and do demos again because it's fun again. They spent that time focusing on work and focusing on family, and they missed that community part of the demo scene and the joy of just making a small production. And they try to find new ways to push the limits of the machine or just have fun with their long-lost friends in the demo scene. So you'll be seeing a lot more demos for those small, old-school platforms. You can call them old-school platforms. Commodore 64, Amiga, even ZX Spectrum also has a little bit of still keeps releasing stuff. We see the same on the Atari, on the CPC. So a lot of those old platforms still have a decent amount of releases per year because of those people who prefer to focus on those platforms instead of going for PC where, you know, the sky is the limit or the GPU you have is the limit. Pros by platforms. I guess I'm not gonna cover this. Not really any more relevant from what I already said. High priority has been on demos as usual. The 4K and 64K was pretty much battling there. I think there have been more 4Ks on the most recent years from 2014 to 2018. Would be nice to see information on that. But I think there have been more 4K stuff. There was a bit of a research on the 64K, a resurge on the 64K, but not really picked up. But on the last couple of years, there have been more 64Ks than, I don't know, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, where it seemed to like, the standards seem to have been set so high from Conspiracy and Farbroush and those other guys that seemed like it was sort of dead. And then Mercury sort of restarted the whole thing. And also the guys from Sweden, Approximate, also were doing some interesting stuff on 64K. And it sort of showed up again. But you only see very good 64K releases, mostly on Revision. That's my opinion. There are a few others, of course, but mostly it's about Revision. So there are not that many per year, but when they are usually good, which is nice for the category. There's also been a bit of research on the small bite-size competitions, 128 bytes, 256 bytes. We've seen on the last couple of years a lot more interest going back on those kind of categories that were sort of abandoned and always like a niche in the demo scene. It's also interesting to acknowledge, and would be cool to have some statistics on that as well. And also web as a platform has also been increasing a lot. That's also a pretty known factor. So that's all from this article. I repeat that it was made in 2014, so there's that 4-year gap that we are left analyzing. So the question is, are there more or less seniors releases than in the past? Yes, there are less seniors releases than the past. If you compare to the 90s, we are less people. But does it really matter? I don't think so. I mean, the scene is what you make of it. The scene will only be truly dead when you stop caring about the demo scene. When you don't make demos anymore, then the demo scene is no longer relevant for you. As long as someone is still wanting to make new demos, it will remain relevant and interesting, and people will still check new releases. That's what really matters. The other part of the question was, we may have lost the technical lead to the AAA games, but is that important? Yes, we have lost the technical lead to AAA games. That's true. We still have seen a lot of people doing interesting stuff, though, as in terms of technical achievements. The work from Smash Firelight has been very good in that regard. The guys from Conspiracy also pushed the limits of what you can do on 64K. Mercury guys, RGBA also showed what you can do a lot in the 4K category. In the past, I don't know how back I can go to still be considered relevant. Like, are we talking about 2018, or are we talking about from 2010 to the way to 2018? What is old? What is new? That's one of the issues that it would need to be clarified for me to answer this question more clearly. But yeah, if you compare with AAA games like, I don't know, Tomb Raider or Red Dead Redemption, GTA, those kind of titles, Destiny, I've been playing Destiny 2 a lot recently, you see that they have better quality graphics and assets and music production, and that's normal because they have teams of a lot of people, well, multi-studios sometimes even, and quality assurance, and they can have that dedication into it, which for us as demo sceners is mostly a hobby, and we still do it just for fun on our free time. So it's hard to compete with that, but you still see a lot of 4Ks and 64Ks nowadays that explore the potential of the GPU and new possibilities with GPU, particle systems, rendering systems. You can still see a few things like that. Not on the level of AAA, but some niche stuff. You can see some of them being explored in the demo scene. And the other side is that we still have the creative part, the making demos because it's fun part, the community part, the artistic part on the demo scene, which game development has been known to be more accepted as an art medium, as a channel. So we can't claim for the demo scene that it's like the purest form that you can express yourself doing digital art. That's not true. You can do a lot of interesting things with games as well. You can tell stories, narratives, even abstract things with the game and make something very interesting. And the demo scene is another form, another way of doing things. Like, you don't necessarily need to be interactive to tell something interesting and different. So that's where the demo scene still is relevant, and that's why we still do demos, I guess. There are, for me at least, I distinguish between the people who are on PC trying to do stuff on PC and still have fun, just because they're used to PC, it's accessible, it's the new technology, it's what is more interesting for them to explore. And then there are a lot of people on the demo scene who are connected to old school platforms because they know that machine, they like that machine, and they like the constraints and the concept of using those constraints as a source of inspiration. Everyone has the same setup, and when you show what you can do with that setup, it is somehow more relevant and more interesting, especially for people who already know that platform. So yeah, I think demo scene is still perfectly valid. I don't think we should really care that much that we are losing lead in terms of either artistic or technical achievements that other scenes are doing out there or other industries are doing out there. We should just keep doing what we're doing. As long as you have fun making a demo, that's what really matters. And releasing it and talking with other demo sceners about it, how you can improve yourself as a person, to know more about the machine, to know more about expressing yourself through digital art. I think that's the most relevant part of the demo scene, and that's what we should focus on. So yeah, I hope this video was useful. Let me know what you guys think on the comments below, and see you next time. Bye bye. Take care.